Hello. Today, what we're going to do is Chapter 8 handout. The last thing we'll cover in this class. Not bank reconciliations. Hold on, this is wrong. It should be accounts receivable. Next class, we'll do the practice exam, and then I'll send out the exam, and it will be due on Friday the 19th. And Friday the 19th is it's a magical date. It's everything is due by Friday the I say 19th. I'm being silly here. It's Friday the 17th. Everything's due. That's the last day of the semester. And it's also the last day to turn in anything. So if you're missing assignments or exams or whatever, make sure you get them in by Friday, 12/17. If you are missing stuff too, remember that the Zoom meetings are all recorded. They're in Blackboard. And let me, if you go to recorded Zoom meetings, you know, the handouts are there, the recorded Zoom meetings are there. So if you're missing anything, find the Zoom, find the the Zoom meeting and click on it, and it'll walk you through whatever you're missing. And turn that in, and the exams are in your email. So yeah, but everything needs to be turned in by Friday the 17th. So that's not this Friday, next Friday. Next week. I will be here for the two classes, the 2-day classes. I'll be at regular time, 12:30. We're not going to cover any new material. So there is no class in new material. I'll be here in case anyone has questions to ask about anything. So those 2 days, I'm going to leave those open. And if you have any questions, anything you want to go over, or whatever, I will certainly be here, but we will not be covering new material. It's whatever questions you have, I'll go over at that time. Question on that? Okay, well, let's go ahead and pull up the Chapter 8 handout. And the Chapter 8 handout is on accounts receivable. It's on accounts receivable, and it will be the last topic that we cover. And here's a problem with it with accounts receivable. Let me stop this for a second. How this turned up. For accounts receivable, if you have a number of accounts receivable, it's likely that some of those are not going to be paid for whatever reason. People go bankrupt. People lose their jobs, people leave the country, people die. There's all kinds of reasons why you won't always collect all the accounts receivable. So having the accounts receivable on the books at the full amount is sort of misleading, because you know that some of those are just not going to be collected. Unforeseen things that happen in the future. So the question is, what do you do with that? You have these on the books in a certain amount, but you're not going to be able to collect that amount. And over time, you'll kind of get used to how much you can collect. What percentage of it you collect. Will 1% of them go bad? Will 5% of them go bad, or whatever it is? You kind of get a feel for your business, but how many of those will go bad. If you're just starting your own business, if you're just starting out for the first time, you might look at something like the industry average. There's industry averages for, whatever they are, the steel industry, or whatever it is. That there's, a lot of times you can look at averages, and they'll show what, on average, what amount people will be able to will be not collectible. But anyway, so some of them are not collectible. And here's why it's important. First of all, the accounts receivable are on an asset. It's on the balance sheet. And it's really too high in a lot of cases because you're going to not collect some of those accounts. And you know you're not going to collect some of them. You just don't know who they are. And that's the problem. The accounts receivable, you'll have all these people that owe you money. Maybe you have 200 people that owe you money. You know that some aren't going to be able to pay, but you don't know who they are. Yeah, if you did, you probably wouldn't have sold them in the first place. But, you know, so you have all these accounts receivable. You don't know, so you can't just write off an accounts receivable because you don't, you know, for somebody, because you don't know who it's going to be. And this brings up a problem. The problem is you may make a sale in 1 year. Zoom in a little closer here. And that account may be uncollectible, but you may not find out about it till the following year. Now, we do have a thing called the matching rule. And the matching rule says that you should match your revenues and your expenses in the same year, which is kind of obvious, right? If you have revenues for 2021, you should match those with expenses for 2021. But the problem is, you might record a sale, say at the end of 2021, it might be uncollectible in 2022. So that's another problem. Right? If you expense it in 2022, that expense really belongs in 2021. Okay, so you know, well, how do we do this? Well, what we end up doing is making what they call an allowance account. And the allowance account, this is a contra account, just like accumulated depreciation. Let me put that in there. Allowance for doubtful account. This is a contra asset account, capitalized. It's a contra account. It's going to go against the accounts receivable. And in this case, it's going against the accounts receivable, and but you'll notice that we're not writing off the accounts receivable. We're making this allowance account because we don't know who it is. Okay, so we estimate what the bad debt expense is going to be. I'm sorry, my camera's in the way here. So you come up with an estimate what you're not going to collect. At this point, you still don't know who it is. You still don't know who is not going. You're not going to be able to collect for. So coming down here, ooh, goofed my spacing. Okay, coming down here, this allowance account is there because you don't know who is going to be not collectible. Excuse me while I, oh, come on. Okay. So this allowance account is really there because you don't know who it is that is not going to be collectible. Some of these accounts receivable, you know, maybe there's 200 accounts in here. Some are not going to be collectible, but you don't know who it is. You know, the question comes, well, why don't you just write down the accounts receivable? You can't really do that because if you write off an account, that account might be good. There might be another account that's on there that, you know. So because you don't know who it is, you have this allowance account. When you figure out who it is, and you expect that some of these will, that's when this account comes into play. But initially, when you make the estimate, you don't know who it is. You don't know who's not going to be able to pay. Okay. By the way, this is called the allowance method, and this is the best method to use. Allowance method. There's actually two flavors of this method. The first one is percentage of sales. This is the one we're going to be using. There is another one, percentage of accounts receivable method. They both do the same thing. They're both estimates, but we're going to concentrate on the percentage of sales one. It's the easier of the two to use, and again, they're both fine. They're both you can use either one of them. Kind of like LIFO, FIFO, you could use either one. Same thing. And not to make it even more complex, but a lot of companies use both of these. You don't need to know about that now, but anyway, a lot of times they'll use the percentage of sales throughout the year, and then at the end of the year they'll switch over to this method. But we're not going to worry about that. And not all companies do it. It's just some companies do. Okay, so percentage of sales method. This is the method we're going to use, and it's basically saying, okay, of the net sales, what percentage are we going to most likely not collect? Okay. Well, without much further ado, let's go down here to the first one on page 2, number 2, and we'll see how this works. Okay. I'm gonna bold all this stuff. Which guy's learning accounting? Mr. Ted has no idea how to use a computer. Okay, so so we have these sales, and we have these accounts receivable, and we know that we're not going to be able to collect all these accounts receivable. You know, we look at our records in the past. Okay, there was only so many of them were collected. Okay, so let's see what we're going to be looking at here. So we had sales of 300,000. And we're saying that 2% of those will not be collected. So 300,000, where's my calculator? 300,000 times 2%. Oops, turn the calculator on. Remember that. Write that down. Turn the calculator on. Okay. 323 times 0.02 or 2% equals 6,000. Okay, so this is our estimate of what we will not be able to collect. So this is the estimate. Now, being an estimate, it's not going to be 100% correct. They never are, but hopefully it's close. Okay, the journal entry. Date is 12/31. End of the year. We will have oh, wait a minute. There we go. So we're going to expense it, 6,000. On the other side, we're going to have our allowance for doubtful accounts. And that's a contra account. Oops, forgot to put the. Okay, so again, this is just an estimate. But what we're trying to do is say, look, we made these sales in, I don't put a year on here. I should put a year on here. We made these sales in this year, whatever year it is, 2021, just for laughs. So 2021, we made a sale of 300,000. We know we're not going to collect all those. Because in the past, we haven't collected all of them. In the past, maybe 2% of them we didn't collect. Okay, so we just going to come on here and we made an estimate. You say, okay, we don't think that we're going to collect, 6,000 of these. So these sales are really not 300,000, something less than that. Okay, so let's see what's happening down here for our accounts receivable and our allowance for doubtful accounts. And we're going to concentrate just on the allowance for doubtful accounts. Okay, we already had 1,000 in there. That 1,000 is this 1,000. It goes on the same page or not? Not. Yeah, I'll go more. So that 1,000 is this 1,000 we have sitting in that, and that's from a previous period. There's probably still accounts on there that we're thinking we're not going to collect, or maybe our estimate was off a little bit. Okay. Now we just added 6,000 to this account. I'm going to zoom back in. So total allowance for doubtful accounts is 7,000. And so these, again, this is set up, and this whole purpose of this is because we don't know who is going to go, which accounts are not going to be collected. We don't know who is not going to be able to pay. That's the whole purpose of that account. If we knew who it was, we'd draft their account. We don't know who it is. We do know that in the past, we haven't collected all the accounts for any number of reasons. So some of these accounts over here are not going to be collected, or we estimate they're not going to be collected. Okay, so here's how this would be shown on the balance sheet. Accounts receivable is an asset, just like we did in chapter 1. It's on the books for 78,000. We don't think we are going to collect that. We don't think we're going to collect 7,000 of those. So the net accounts receivable will be, was that 71,000? So this is really the true amount that we think we're going to take in for this thing. You know, the net receivables, this is what they're really worth. The receivables are really worth 71,000. Arrow doesn't quite make it all the way. Okay. And again, we just don't know who it is. We're pretty sure that we're not going to collect all of them, but we just don't know who it is we're not going to collect. So we can't simply start writing off accounts right now because we don't know who it is. You know, there's going to be 200 customers here, and maybe, you know, 194 of them are fine. You know, we're going to collect them, but there's going to be some that we're not going to collect. Question on that? So the accounts receivable, we set up an allowance account for a couple of reasons. The first reason is if we simply put 78,000 on the books, people would assume that we're going to collect 78,000 when we're pretty sure we're not going to collect 78,000. So this would be overstated. It'd be showing too much on the books if we left it at 78,000. Not only that, this expense belongs in the current year. The sales are made in this year, whatever year it is. The expenses belong in that year. So this is kind of why we do it this method. This is why we are using this method. Questions? The last chapter, don't say anything. Okay, I'll be quiet and see if you guys can figure out number 3. A strikingly similar. Oh wait, no, there's something different on number 3. Number 3. I got to set it up. I'll let you guys do the journal entries after. Number 3 is a little bit different in that we have sales returns, kind of like we had in chapter. We had it in chapter 6. So, talking about this would be 3% of the net sales. So we're going to take our sales. Oops, it's not how you spell sales. And our sales returns and allowances. A. Yeah, I'm going to change this a little bit. Okay. So we had sales of 430,000. Sales returns allowances. People brought some stuff back, 10,000. So our net sales, oops, would be 420. So this is the number you are going to multiply by equals something. All right, so these are the sales returns and allowances. This is they've returned some things. So the net sales, what's left over is the 420. Okay, I'll be quiet. Okay, I think these almost look like this. The journal entry should be for 12,600. Excuse me. We come in here for the allowance for doubtful accounts, and there's still 2,000 sitting in that account from a previous year. We add 12,600 on it, so now there's 14,600, and this is our estimate that we don't think we're going to collect. So we think we're not going to collect 14,600 of it. We don't know who it is, right? We don't know who is not going to be able to pay. That's why we have this set up there. But whoever it is, we think that the real value of the account, the most accurate value, the estimate that we can come up with, is it's not worth 185,000. It's worth 170,400. So people reading this will say, okay, they're going to probably collect. I'm so sorry, that is rude. This is the real amount that they're probably going to collect from it. So, this 185 number is probably not going to be the amount of cash that comes in. It's probably going to be 170,400 or something close to that. Questions? Okay. All right, now we're going to go to writing off on accounts receivable. How do you write it off? All right. Now notice something about this allowance for doubtful accounts. We've already set aside kind of like a bucket or I'm tipping over or something here. So we're already, still looks that way. So we've set up this allowance account for the accounts that are going to go bad. When they do go bad, we're going to say, oh, you know what? We already set up this account for just this case. Everything in the allowance account, we go back. Everything in the allowance account's already been expensed. There is no additional expense here. Notice that we have already expensed, in this case, 12,600. Anything that's in this allowance account has already been expensed. So there's not going to be any more expense when we write off an account. It's already been expensed. Everything in the allowance account has been expensed. So no more expenses. After we do this, no more expenses. Okay, so let's go down here to this. Fold this whole thing. Hey, what happened there? Okay, March 21st, 2022. The barber company is notified that a customer had declared bankruptcy and would not be able to pay off their accounts receivable. The accounts receivable had a balance of 300. Okay. Accounts receivable and other accounts are the following at the time. Okay, so this is what we have in our allowance, and this is what we have in our allowance for doubtful accounts. Okay, so before the write-off, what amount was in the net accounts receivable? Okay, well, we're just going to take, so this is before we write off anything. It's 150,000, and then the allowance for doubtful accounts is 50. So it looked like this. 150,000 accounts receivable. We think that 500 of those are not going to be collected. So the net accounts receivable is 149,500. So this is our net account. This is before we write off anything. Okay, so we come down here and we're going to write off this accounts receivable. So because we have as an allowance account, so we're going to write it off, and I'll show you up here in these accounts, and then I'll put it down there in the regular journal entry. So we're thinking that 300 of these are not going to be collectible. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take 300 out of the accounts receivable. And this allowance account was set up for just this situation that you're not going to be collected. So we're going to take 300 out of the allowance for doubtful accounts. Okay, so we're going to credit accounts receivable. We're going to debit allowance for doubtful accounts. Sorry, I lost the date. March 22nd. March 2nd. Okay, so this is. Ooh, too much. Okay. So now we know who it is, right? Now we know who it is. So we're going to take it out of, we set up an account just for this case. And now we're going to take off the accounts receivable. So whoever this person or business was, we will take it out of their this is going to look a mess, I can tell already. So we've taken it out of the accounts receivable and out of the allowance for doubtful accounts. So that's a journal entry. Reducing the accounts receivable. They no longer, we're no longer think we're going to collect these. The person went bankrupt. So we're probably not going to be able to collect that. And we go, okay, but wait a minute. We've already set aside some money for just this scenario. We just didn't know who it was. Now we know who it is. So this allowance account, now we know who it is. And now we can just simply write off the account, and this allowance account's already set up to do this. And again, if you're wondering why don't we expense it, because everything in this allowance for doubtful accounts has already been expensed. I know it's confusing, but that's what we had to do. So here's the question: how much is still left in our accounts receivable and our allowance for doubtful accounts? So we had 150,000 minus 300 is what, 149. What is that? 149,700? You may want to check me on that one. So this is what's left in the accounts receivable. Over here, 500 minus 300 is 200. You don't have to check me on that one. I think that one's good on that one. So this is what these two accounts would have in them now. I'm going to copy this down just so it's on the same page. We come down here. In hindsight, I should have maybe put those T accounts lower on here. I'm going to insert them here. Bah. Yeah, I'm just doing this to get them on this, the same area. Okay. So coming down to C, so okay, well, what's the value of the accounts receivable now? Now, intuitively, you say, okay, we wrote off an account, the accounts receivable, net accounts receivable will probably be less. Actually, it's not. Because you have this allowance account, you already knew someone were going to go bad. You just figured out who it was. So this would look like this. You'll notice the net accounts receivable is worth exactly the same as it did before. It's just we figured out who it was now. We've already, in essence, we've already taken off this $300 when we did the allowance account. It's already been taken off. We just figured out who it is now. It doesn't matter. So the I say it doesn't matter, but the net accounts receivable, when you write off something, does not change.
Professor, where did the 149,700 come from?
Oh, the 150 minus the 300.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Let me put the, hold on a second. And the same thing over here. So spacing's a little funny on that one. Yeah, the allowance account is kind of like, I think about like kind of as a bucket or something. I don't know how you want to put it, but that, okay, we know that something's going to go bad. We just figure out who it is. Now, when they do go bad, we're not surprised by it. We've already expensed it. So now it's just a matter of, putting it in the bucket or taking it out of the bucket, maybe is a better way to put it. That, okay, we now know who is not going to be collected. And we still think that there's another 200 out there that won't be collected. And so, as time goes on, more and more, as you find out more and more people that aren't going to be collected, this allowance for doubtful accounts goes down and down and down. And it's an estimate. Can it go negative? Yeah. If you write off more than you think you're going to write off. It could also, if you write off less than you think it could be positive. So, well, hopefully it's close. And again, it's an estimate. So it's never going to be perfect. We don't have a crystal ball to look into to see what the future is going to hold. So, but it's an estimate. And again, writing off this account does not change what we think we're going to collect from it. We knew some of these accounts were going to go bad. We now just know which account to write off, but we always knew that some of these accounts were going to go bad. And that's why we had already, in essence, taken that $300 out along with 200 more for just this scenario. So it really doesn't change what we think we're going to collect for the accounts receivable. I know it's kind of strange, it's kind of a timing difference thing. Okay, let's go ahead and do number 5, and I will be quiet. I get my page here. Okay. So I will be quiet. Okay, so the $200 of accounts receivable, take it out of the accounts receivable. Now we know who it is. We're gonna write off whoever's account it is. Um, You know, by name, maybe customer number, whatever it is, you're gonna write it off. And you're not surprised by this. You know, you've already set up that, okay, we think there's gonna be 1,000, it's not collected. Okay, now we know there's what 200 of it is. So this is not something new to you. It's not a surprise. Now you're simply figuring out of that 1,000, we know 200 of it now. Okay, so you write off that account. Now before the write-off, the accounts receivable was worth 209,000. Here's the actual journal entry for the write-off. You know, these are. I'm going to steal these pointers, so I don't have too many pointers going at once. Then you see in textbooks, they have all these lines drawn all over, like, oh, you know, who can follow that? And then you realize, okay, well, I can do it better. Well, you probably can, or I can't anyways. So anyway, so we're writing off the accounts receivable. Whatever account receivable this is, we are not going to collect it. We already knew this was going to happen. We have this account set up specifically for this occurrence. So we're simply going to say, okay, of the 1,000 that we think we're not going to collect, now we know 200 of it. And when we come down here, we find, okay, so the accounts receivable was decreased by 200. It went down to 209,800. Took out the 200 from it. And the allowance for doubtful accounts, also we took out 200. Now we know, you know, who it was. Didn't know before, now we do. And then the thing that's a little bit surprising to, I don't know, to all people, but to a lot of people, it might be surprising, is that when you write it off, it really doesn't affect the value of your net accounts receivable. Why? Because you knew some of them were going to be bad. You already made the adjustment for them to be bad. Some of them are not going to be collected. Bad is maybe a bad word for it. Bad is a bad word. But it you know, so it doesn't change the amount you're going to collect. Now there's still 800 out there. You're still going to probably get some more letters saying, you know, bankruptcy, someone died, someone, you know, left the country, whatever. So, you know, there's still going to be some out there that you're not going to collect. You know that, you know, it's coming, you just don't know who it is. So there's still of these leftover 209,800 of accounts receivable. Some of these are still probably not going to be collected. You still don't know who they are. You know who this one is, but you don't know who the rest of them are. And you're not going to write them off until you figure out who it is. Question on that? Hey, that is the last topic of Accounting 210. Yay! Next class, we'll have a practice exam on Chapter 7 and Chapter 8. And then I'll send out the exam. And everything will be due on December 17th. And that's the end of the class. So next class is the last one. No new material. Well, the practice exam might be a little bit, hopefully learn something on the practice exam. But yeah, so that's it. Any questions?
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, yeah, great. And I'll see you on Thursday for the very last scheduled class, and then we will be done. Okay, guys. Have a good day.
Have a good one. Bye.